Maya Richardson sat in the hallway outside Professor David Whitmore's office at Columbia University, clutching her senior thesis and trying to control her breathing. She'd just received an email summoning her to this meeting with a single ominous line: "We need to discuss serious concerns about your thesis submission." Maya was a senior majoring in American Studies with a concentration in African American history and culture. She'd maintained a 3.8 GPA throughout her time at Columbia, earned departmental honors, and was on track to graduate summa cum laude in 2 months. Her senior thesis, required for honors distinction, examined the economic impact of black-owned businesses in Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance, drawing on primary source documents from archives she'd personally researched. She'd spent 9 months on the thesis, working closely with her faculty advisor, who'd praised her original research and sophisticated analysis. She'd submitted the final draft 3 weeks ago, confident it represented her best academic work. Then this morning, she'd received Professor Whitmore's email. Whitmore wasn't her thesis advisor, but served on the thesis review committee that evaluated all senior honors submissions in the department. His email provided no details about what concerns he had, just the demand for an immediate meeting. The door to Whitmore's office opened, and the professor appeared, a man in his mid-50s wearing a tweed jacket with leather elbow patches, looking every bit the stereotype of an Ivy League humanities professor. "Miss Richardson, come in." Maya entered the office, a cluttered space dominated by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, an antique desk piled with papers, and framed degrees from Harvard, Yale, and Oxford covering the walls. Whitmore gestured to a chair facing his desk and sat down with her thesis in front of him, covered in red marks. "Miss Richardson, I've reviewed your thesis submission and I have serious concerns about academic integrity." Maya felt her stomach drop. "The quality of writing and sophistication of analysis in this thesis is inconsistent with your previous coursework. The research draws on archival sources that would require extensive historical methodology training you haven't received, and several passages demonstrate a level of scholarly maturity that seems unlikely for an undergraduate." "Professor Whitmore, everything in that thesis is my own work. I spent 9 months researching and writing it. My advisor approved every stage of my progress." Whitmore leaned back in his chair with obvious skepticism. "Your advisor may have been too trusting. I've been teaching at Columbia for 28 years. I know what undergraduate work looks like. This thesis is too sophisticated, too polished, too professional. It reads like graduate-level scholarship, not undergraduate writing. Maybe that's because I worked extremely hard on it. I treated it as seriously as any graduate student would. I spent weeks in archives. I read dozens of scholarly sources. I revised multiple drafts based on feedback. Or perhaps you had inappropriate assistance, graduate student help that went beyond acceptable tutoring, or you found existing research and passed it off as your own with enough modifications to avoid detection by plagiarism software." Maya felt anger rising alongside her anxiety. "Are you accusing me of plagiarism? I'm saying this work doesn't appear to be authentically yours. The writing quality, the research depth, the analytical sophistication, it all suggests sources you're not acknowledging. I have all my research notes, all my drafts, all my advisor meeting summaries. I can document every stage of this thesis development. It's completely my own work." Whitmore opened the thesis to a page marked with a tab. This section analyzing W.E.B. Du Bois's economic theories and their influence on Harlem business development demonstrates understanding of economic history and sociology that undergraduate American Studies students typically don't possess. I took courses in economic history and sociology as electives, and I spent 3 weeks reading Du Bois's complete works. That section represents genuine engagement with the material. "Miss Richardson, I'm trying to give you an opportunity to be honest. If you received help that crossed ethical boundaries, if you used sources without proper attribution, now is the time to acknowledge it. Academic dishonesty at this stage, if admitted, can result in a failing grade on the thesis. If discovered later through investigation, it can result in expulsion and revocation of your degree." Maya pulled her laptop from her bag with shaking hands. "I can show you my research files right now. Every source is documented. Every citation is proper. My advisor verified all of this. Your advisor isn't objective. She's clearly become too invested in your success to critically evaluate whether this work is genuinely yours." The implication stung. Professor Michelle Santos, Maya's advisor, was a black woman and one of only 3 black faculty members in the American Studies department. Whitmore was suggesting Santos had been negligent in her oversight because of racial solidarity. Professor Santos is an accomplished scholar who takes academic integrity seriously. She's not going to approve plagiarized work regardless of the student's race. Whitmore's expression suggested Maya had confirmed his suspicions by mentioning race. No one said anything about race, Miss Richardson. You didn't have to. You're questioning my work based on assumptions about what a black student is capable of producing. You see sophisticated scholarship and immediately assume I must have plagiarized or received inappropriate help because you don't believe I'm intellectually capable of this level of work. That's an unfair characterization. My concerns are based on professional experience evaluating student work, not on your race. Then explain why you're questioning my thesis when you approved equally sophisticated theses from white students last semester. I've read them. They used archival sources. They demonstrated graduate-level analysis, but you didn't summon those students to meetings about academic integrity. Whitmore stood, his voice taking on an authoritative edge. Miss Richardson, I'm not going to sit here and be accused of racism. I have legitimate concerns about your work. Given your unwillingness to address those concerns honestly, I'm assigning your thesis a failing grade and referring this matter to the Academic Integrity Committee for formal investigation. Maya felt the room spinning. A failing grade on her thesis meant no honors distinction. A referral to the Integrity Committee meant potential disciplinary action that could appear on her permanent record, affecting graduate school applications and her entire academic future. You can't fail my thesis without evidence of actual wrongdoing. You have suspicions based on nothing but your subjective impression that the work is too good for me to have produced. I can absolutely fail work I determine doesn't meet academic standards, and I'm exercising that authority now. You'll receive formal notification of the failing grade and the integrity referral by email within 24 hours. This meeting is over. Maya left Whitmore's office in shock. She walked across campus in a daze, her mind racing through the catastrophic implications of what had just happened. She'd worked for 4 years maintaining excellent grades, contributing to her department, building relationships with faculty. Now a single professor's assumption about her capabilities threatened to destroy everything. She called her mother, Dr. Lisa Richardson, a sociology professor at Howard University, and explained what had happened through tears. Maya, honey, take a breath. This is outrageous, but we're going to fight it. You have documentation of your research process. You have your advisor's support, and you need to contact the department chair immediately to report what Whitmore said and did. Mum, it's my word against a tenured professor's. Who's going to believe me? Sweetheart, there's something you should know. Your father didn't want to tell you until it was officially announced, but given this situation, you need to know now. Your father was appointed university president last month. The announcement goes public next week. He's your father first, and the president second. He'll make sure this situation is handled properly. Maya felt a complex mix of relief and concern. Her father, Dr. James Richardson, was a distinguished educational leader who'd served as president of 2 smaller universities before being recruited to Columbia. She'd known he was interviewing for the position, but hadn't known he'd been selected. Mum, I don't want special treatment because Dad's the president. I want this evaluated fairly on the merits. And it will be. But fair evaluation means ensuring Whitmore doesn't abuse his authority based on racial bias. Your father has oversight responsibility for faculty conduct. This falls within his purview, regardless of his personal connection to you. That evening, Maya met with her thesis advisor, Professor Michelle Santos, and explained the situation. Santos was furious. David Whitmore has been a problem in this department for years. He's challenged work from black students and students of color at rates far exceeding his challenges to white students. But he's tenured, he's been here forever, and complaints haven't gone anywhere. What should I do? He's already assigned the failing grade and filed the integrity referral. First, you're going to formally appeal both the grade and the referral. I'll provide a statement supporting your work and documenting our thesis development process. Second, I'm going to contact the department chair about Whitmore's pattern of bias. And third, you should let your father know what's happening. I understand you don't want special treatment, but this isn't about special treatment. This is about a faculty member abusing his authority based on racial assumptions, and the university president needs to know that's occurring. Maya called her father that night. Dr. James Richardson listened carefully as Maya described her meeting with Whitmore, the accusations, and the threatened consequences. Maya, I'm going to handle this as university president, not as your father. That means following proper procedures and ensuring you receive fair evaluation. But it also means I'm going to examine whether Professor Whitmore has engaged in discriminatory conduct that violates university policy. If he has, there will be consequences. Over the next week, multiple things happened simultaneously. Maya filed formal appeals of her failing grade and the academic integrity referral, supported by extensive documentation of her research process and a detailed statement from Professor Santos. Professor Santos filed a formal complaint with the department chair about Whitmore's pattern of questioning work from students of color and his dismissive treatment of Maya, and Dr. James Richardson, in his capacity as university president, initiated a review of academic integrity referrals and grade appeals across all departments, specifically examining whether there were disparate patterns based on student demographics. What the review uncovered was damning. Over 10 years, Professor Whitmore had filed academic integrity referrals against 23 students. 19 were students of color, despite students of color representing only 30% of students in his courses. His grade distributions showed black students receiving significantly lower grades than white students, even when controlling for prior academic performance. Most troubling were the descriptions in his referral letters. For white students, Whitmore typically expressed regret about referring students he described as having made mistakes or exercised poor judgment. For students of color, his language was harsh and accusatory, describing deliberate misconduct and questioning whether students belonged at Columbia. The pattern revealed systematic bias that had been ongoing for years without institutional response. Dr. Richardson convened a meeting with the provost, the dean of arts and sciences, and the chair of the American Studies Department. He presented the data on Whitmore's referral patterns and grade distributions. This review shows clear evidence of discriminatory conduct by Professor Whitmore. He's been treating students of color differently than white students for years, assigning lower grades and filing integrity referrals at disproportionate rates. This violates university anti-discrimination policies and our commitment to equitable education. The dean looked uncomfortable. David Whitmore is tenured faculty with 28 years of service. Addressing this situation will be complicated. I understand tenure protections, but tenure doesn't protect faculty from consequences for discrimination. Professor Whitmore's conduct has harmed students and violated university policy. That requires institutional response. The provost asked the question everyone was thinking. President Richardson, your daughter is one of the students Professor Whitmore has treated unfairly. How do we address this without appearing to be driven by personal considerations rather than institutional policy? By focusing on the pattern, not the individual case. Yes, my daughter is one of 23 students Whitmore has referred for integrity violations over 10 years. Yes, she's one of dozens of students of color who've received lower grades from him than their work warranted. But this isn't about my daughter specifically. This is about a faculty member who's engaged in systematic discrimination for years. The fact that his most recent target happens to be related to me doesn't change the underlying conduct or the institutional obligation to address it. The university initiated a formal investigation of Whitmore's conduct. They reviewed all 23 integrity referrals he'd filed, interviewing the students involved. They examined grade distributions across all his courses. They collected statements from students describing their experiences in his classes and with his advising. The investigation confirmed systematic bias. Multiple black students described Whitmore questioning their work quality, suggesting they'd received inappropriate help, or implying they weren't intellectually capable of the work they'd produced. Several described him being dismissive of scholarship on race and racism, treating such topics as less rigorous than other academic subjects. White students, in contrast, generally described Whitmore as supportive and encouraging, even when they produced mediocre work. The university's findings were presented to Whitmore along with notice that his conduct violated anti-discrimination policies and represented cause for termination despite tenure protections. Whitmore's response was defiant. He denied any discriminatory intent, claimed his academic judgments were based solely on objective assessment of student work, and threatened legal action if the university attempted to terminate his employment. The university proceeded with termination proceedings anyway. Columbia's tenure policies allowed termination for cause when faculty engaged in conduct incompatible with university values or harmful to students. The evidence of Whitmore's systematic bias met that standard. Whitmore hired attorneys and fought his termination through every available appeals process. He portrayed himself as a victim of political correctness and claimed the university was retaliating against him for maintaining academic standards. His argument fell apart when the university presented testimony from students he'd harmed. A black woman who'd graduated 3 years earlier described how Whitmore's accusations of plagiarism on her thesis had caused her to abandon plans for graduate school, convinced she wasn't capable of academic success. A Latino student described how Whitmore's persistently low grades had nearly caused him to lose his scholarship, despite strong performance in other courses. The pattern was undeniable, and the harm was real. After 18 months of proceedings, Columbia's Tenure Review Board voted to revoke Whitmore's tenure and terminate his employment. Whitmore sued Columbia for wrongful termination, discrimination, and retaliation.
The case went to trial where the university presented overwhelming evidence of his discriminatory conduct, spanning a decade. The jury found in Columbia's favor on all counts. Whitmore's academic career was over. Meanwhile, Maya Richardson's thesis was re-evaluated by a panel of faculty who had no connection to Whitmore. They reviewed her work, examined her research documentation, and interviewed her at length about her thesis development process. Their conclusion was unequivocal. Maya's thesis represented excellent undergraduate scholarship, demonstrated original research and sophisticated analysis, and merited the highest grade. The integrity referral was dismissed as baseless, and Maya graduated summa cum laude as planned. She went on to graduate school at Princeton, where she earned a doctorate in African American Studies. Her dissertation expanded on her undergraduate thesis work and was published by a major academic press to critical acclaim. 5 years after the incident with Whitmore, Maya was hired as an assistant professor at Columbia, in the very department where Whitmore had tried to derail her academic career. She became known as an advocate for students of color in academia and worked to address bias in student evaluation and mentoring. 10 years after Whitmore's termination, Dr. James Richardson remained Columbia's president, having successfully navigated the complex situation of addressing discrimination that affected his daughter while establishing precedent that tenure didn't protect faculty from consequences for bias. In an interview marking the anniversary of his presidency, Richardson reflected on the Whitmore case and its implications. When Professor Whitmore questioned my daughter's thesis based on assumptions that a black student couldn't produce sophisticated scholarship, he revealed bias that had affected dozens of students over many years. The university had received complaints about his conduct before but hadn't acted decisively. That failure allowed harm to continue. My daughter's situation was different because I was president and had authority to ensure it was investigated properly. But that raises uncomfortable questions. How many other students experienced Whitmore's bias and had no recourse? How many talented scholars never pursued academic careers because a biased professor convinced them they weren't capable? The institutional failure wasn't just Whitmore's discrimination. It was the university's failure to address it until someone with power demanded accountability. Richardson continued, "We've implemented changes to ensure faculty evaluation of students is monitored for potential bias, that complaints about discrimination are investigated thoroughly, and that tenure doesn't shield faculty from consequences when they harm students through discriminatory conduct. Those changes came too late for students Whitmore harmed earlier in his career, but they'll protect future students." David Whitmore never worked in academia again after his termination from Columbia. He attempted to portray himself as a victim of political correctness and cancel culture, but his documented history of discriminatory conduct undermined any sympathy his narrative might have generated. In a later interview, Whitmore offered what seemed like partial reflection, though he never fully acknowledged the harm he'd caused. "I genuinely believed Maya Richardson's thesis was too sophisticated for undergraduate work. That judgment wasn't conscious racism, but it was shaped by unconscious biases about who belongs in elite academic spaces and who's capable of producing excellent scholarship. I saw a young black woman's work and immediately questioned its authenticity rather than recognizing and celebrating her achievement. I lost my career because I couldn't see past those biases. But more importantly, I harmed students who deserved better from their professor. Students who were talented, hard-working, and intellectually capable, but whom I dismissed or questioned because they didn't match my unconscious assumptions about academic excellence." The story became a case study in education programs and faculty development workshops. The tenured professor who accused a student of plagiarism based on racial bias and lost his career when that student turned out to be the university president's daughter and part of a broader pattern of discrimination. But the real lesson wasn't about one professor's downfall. It was about institutional accountability, the importance of addressing bias even when it's held by senior faculty with tenure protections, and the necessity of ensuring all students receive fair evaluation regardless of race. Maya Richardson had produced excellent work and been accused of plagiarism because a professor couldn't imagine a black student being capable of such scholarship. That professor happened to question the wrong student at the wrong time, revealing patterns that had harmed many others who hadn't had the power or platform to demand accountability. And at Columbia University, the reforms implemented after Whitmore's termination ensured that future students wouldn't face the same bias, and future faculty who discriminated would face consequences regardless of their seniority or tenure status.
Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.